खबरों में बने रहने के लिए बेल आइकॉन दबाइए और एबीपी न्यूज को सब्सक्राइब कीजिए।
Thank you. It feels a bit like I walked onto the set of a wrong movie. I guess the one thing I wanted to start by saying is that it's wonderful to get this prize, but it's particularly wonderful, I think, because it's a prize not, I think, for us, but also for the entire movement. I think that this is a movement that we happen to be at the beginning of, I think mostly luck, but it's grown to be a worldwide movement. There are about 400 professors who are in one form or the other associated with JPAL's work, and they all do randomized control trials on issues that as diverse as, U.S. Schools in the Appalachia, to governance problems in Indonesia, and getting children immunized in India, getting children under bed nets in sub-Saharan Africa. So this is a movement that, in some ways, we are kind of the beneficiaries of. We get often. In the press, people say, JPAL's research has showed, we take great pride in it. We had nothing to do with the research. We didn't raise any money for it. It just happened, and we got the credit for it. It's great. We're in a rentier economy at this point. But it's still, I think it's still going to be wonderful for the movement that this prize was given, because I think it's going to make it a little easier to penetrate the many doors that are half open to us or not quite open to us, and hopefully bring the message of policy based on evidence and hard thinking to many other places as well.
The world today is full of somewhat depressing news, especially in the international geopolitical stage. And in the middle of this depressing news, the one hopeful thing there is that the fate of the world's poor has really tremendously improved over the last 3 decades. People don't tend to realize that. People in the US usually are persuaded that poverty keeps increasing, for example. But the truth is that over the last 3 decades, the two groups that did relatively well in world economy are the ultra-rich and the ultra-poor. Why are the ultra-poor doing better? Or in part because some economies are growing fast. In part also because, in particular India and China, but in part also because the policies that aim to help the poor cope with the issues that they face have improved. Infant mortality has been cut in half since 1990, maternal mortality by even more than that. And that has happened in countries that are not particularly wealthy, and even in countries that have not becoming richer. Even in the poorest countries, there have been progress on these important issues. Almost all of the children go to school, for example. If policies have improved, largely it's not because of us, to be honest. But I think that entire movement that Abhijit talked about has played a small role in it, in that it has, I think, raised the possibility and the hope that one could be a little bit more rigorous about what policies and what type of things can really help the poor. Rigorous in two ways: rigorous in designing the policies, not based on your intuition or whatever happens to be the flavor of the month, but based on a better understanding of how the poor live, why they make the choices they make, what are the specific traps that hold them back, and what lever to push that could unlock these traps. Better also, more rigorous also in the way that accepting the possibility that maybe you didn't get it right exactly the first time, and that innovating, experimenting is useful. And that is something that, of course, the three of us with Michael Kramer could never have achieved. But that is something that this entire movement of going at it with a lot of persistence and a lot of details in the big and in the small, and small project and giant project, progressively has achieved. And the hope now, with JPAL North America and JPAL Europe and JPAL LAC is that some of this rigor that we try to develop in the poor countries moves back up north, and we also improve our understanding of what are people's real trouble, our respect for them and their dignity, and therefore a better, more imaginative solution to solve these issues. Abhijit rightly put this in the broader context of the big movements that is changing development economics and as much beyond us. But I want to bring it back a little bit to the more local environment of MIT. As you know, I'm a MIT product through and through. Came to do my PhD here. Was hired as an assistant professor against all norms. Never left. When I made this choice, many wise people told me that it was a horrible career move and was probably leading to perdition. I said, I understand that it's not good to stay in your own institution, but I think this is here that I have the right environment to pursue what I want to pursue. I've not been regretting this choice for any number of reasons. And so I want to thank, first of all, the department. From my advisor, it's a bit awkward because it's one of them, and but Josh Angrist, who is the other one, and Michael Kramer, who I guess makes it doubly awkward, and also the entire faculty who taught me, and all of the students who were with me. And I think together, so this is not a part that Abhijit enjoyed as a student since he had the misfortune of being down the road. But we also want to thank the department for being a wonderful place to work and to talk about economics. And maybe in particular Bengt Armstrong, who I think so much before us the possibility of the idea we had. The first time we thought about forming something, he was the chair of the department, and he told us, we both vividly remember, you have a product that is going to make a big difference. And we're like, whatever. And sure, can you get us a bit of money so we hire someone? And then the second very important person in development of JPAL that we want to acknowledge here is Susan Hockfield, who, when she came as president of MIT, just before Raphael, met us. In fact, I think just before she became president, met us, and we explained what we were working on. And she's like, oh, you're bringing the method of science to social science. This is so refreshing. I'm going to help you. And she was true to her word, and she helped us in many ways, nurturing, always ready to talk, and also, quite frankly, putting us in front of possible donors. And in that, we met, I think, Mohammed Jamil, who is the third person that we really want to acknowledge in the birth of JPAL, Mohammed Jamil, who saw in us, maybe a little bit like Bengt, and maybe for the same reason that he has business acumen that none of us really had, who saw in us and in our project something that could make a difference and decided to risk his reputation and his money behind that. This would not have happened without the ecosystem. This would not have happened, of course, without his vision and his commitment for the world's poor, which was very apparent then and still apparent today. This is the type of outstanding people that you want to have associated with a university. And finally, I think on behalf of both of us, we want to thank all the students, the ones who have been our students forever, and who are, some of them are still in the room today, some of them are gone in the wild world, who have who have formed great big families and community, and all of the students who are here, who are not our students, but make our days exciting every single morning that we wake up and come here, and all of the staff of JPAL here and worldwide, all maybe hundreds of them, and in particular the leadership and the vision of Rachel Glenister, the first executive director of JPAL, and Iqbal Dhaliwal, who succeeded her when she went on bigger and better things. Thank you very much for coming here on a Monday of holidays. We deeply appreciate it.
Okay. So moving.
Thank you so much for those beautiful remarks. So in addition to those in this room, like I said, there are many more participating remotely by the phone bridge and by the webcast today. So what we're going to do, just for the journalists in the room, is we're going to alternate between the room, the phone bridge, and the webcast. And I have some of the webcast cards in front of me. So we're going to try to accommodate as many of your questions as we can today. So we can bring you back up. First question from the room.
What decided you to pursue this particular method? At which point did you think this was a worthwhile method to pursue?
I think combination of actually, I think by the time I understood what it takes to get answers to empirical questions right, I thought the method, and most of that sounded hokey to me. Most of the work that was seen as an established truth in 1990, including my own work, some of it, I thought was a little bit hokey. And that made it much more attractive to look for a method that would give me a little more confidence in what we were doing. And I think came out of mostly frustration, often with myself.
As I said, I'm a student of Josh Angrist, and the way that I've been taught to learn about the world is how can you get as close as possible to a randomized control trial. So as soon as I had a little bit more flexibility and freedom and time, I was like, why do I need to be close to a randomized control trial? Why can't we just do it?
Any more questions from the room before we go to the bridge? Oh, yes, right over there.
What is your real belief for education?
A real one or a fake one? Our real belief for education is as follows. Every kid can learn, but they cannot learn if they are taught something that is so far away from what they already know that there is no way they can catch up. Unfortunately, there are millions and millions and millions of children who are in school, whose parents are very excited about school, who themselves are very excited about school, and get completely discouraged within days or within weeks because they don't understand what's going on, because they have no reason to understand, because they are taught something that is way too advanced for them, and they are being made to understand that they are stupid and they will never succeed. We spend a lot of our career and work with a wonderful NGO called Pratham that we work with to try and change that.
And that's a great question. Thank you.
So we're going to, very quickly, they're going to take a question from the phone bridge, and they're going to have to pipe the audio explaining the instructions to the room. So we're going to do that right now. My apologies.
Thank you. For the audio participants, that is *1 to ask a question.
Do we have our first question? Oh, okay.
Can you just describe in detail, and sorry if you're into this, we'd love to know more about that moment when you got the phone call.
You were more awake than I was. A lot more awake.
Can I be transparent? So my phone rang, and I picked it up, and it says it's an important call from Sweden. And I thought to myself, well, now that you woke me up, just go ahead. And then someone very serious person told me that you've been awarded the full name of the prize that I don't yet know. That I'll work on it. And I said, oh, really? And he said, that this is with Professor Banerjee and Professor Kramer. And I said, oh, you want to talk to him? And so then they talked to him, and then they went back to us and said, well, would you be ready for a press conference in an hour? We should make a cup of coffee. And Abhijit said, I'm going to go back to bed. And so I woke up, I got showered, etc., and then he went back to bed. I took the press conference. Mind you, they had said they wanted just one of us, so that was fair enough. And then we started the day.
They even said they wanted you because they wanted a woman. And I didn't qualify.
So I actually have a question from the internet, but I'm going to let you read it. They sent it in French.
Oh.
And they'd like you to answer in French, if you wouldn't mind.
Should I translate, or should I read in French and answer in French?
You should answer in French, but for the room, you could do it in English.
So the questions are, what does this prize signify for you? Que signifie ce prix pour vous? Number one. And number two, is it the proof that your approach is the right one? Is that, est-ce que c'est la preuve que votre approche est la bonne? Que signifie ce prix pour nous? Je crois que, comme Abhijit l'a dit, c'est la consécration des progrès qui ont été accomplis jusqu'ici, à la fois par nous, mais surtout par tous les chercheurs qui travaillent avec ces méthodes, tous les partenaires, tous les gouvernements. Et c'est aussi un espoir et une indication que ça va nous donner encore plus d'énergie et encore plus de vent dans nos voiles pour faire mieux, pour continuer à affecter la vie de centaines de millions de personnes dans le monde. Est-ce que c'est la preuve que notre approche est la bonne? Non. Pour être honnête, c'est la preuve que nos très respectés collègues suédois pensent que notre approche est la bonne. Mais évidemment, il n'y a pas de preuve que notre approche est la bonne. S'il y a une preuve que notre approche est la bonne, c'est que la vie des gens qui sont affectés par les politiques que nous essayons d'étudier est améliorée. C'est la seule preuve qu'on peut vraiment apporter.
We have one from the bridge. Someone there?
Hi, can I go ahead?
Yes.
Great. Congratulations, professors. Could you please summarize for us what your work means for governments and institutions who are in a place where they can intervene in a material way for improving outcomes among the poor?
I mean, there's always a little bit of hope for what we do. So it's not that, I mean, governments are free to not use our evidence. But to be honest, I think our experience over the last 20 years has been, 20 years ago, you go and tell somebody in government we're going to do a randomized control trial, and they look at you like you had just escaped from some mental health institution. Now they look at you and say that, okay, is that expensive? Has anybody else done it? Can you give me an example of somebody powerful who has endorsed it? But they ask the right kinds of questions, and we get to the second base. Not always all the way, but at least there is some sense in which they're open to the idea that evidence is valuable, that we know something, and that might actually be useful to them.
Is there another one in the room? Oh, yes.
I've already probably answered this in different ways. I'm just wondering, just for the layman who may have no idea what you've been doing or familiarity with your work, if you could just sort of explain in layman's terms what you did.
Yeah, let me maybe give you an example, a concrete example. Maybe that's the easiest. So we run what's called randomized control trials. And the objective of randomized control trials is to run an experiment to see whether something affects something else the way you expect or in a different way. So I'll give you an example. Several years ago, we were interested in trying to understand why people do not immunize their children and what could be done about it. And we spent a lot of time in India, in very remote places, in Rajasthan, where immunization rates were very, very low, of the order of less than 5% full immunization rate. The prevailing view at the time was that the main problem was that immunization services were not reliably available, and that's why people wouldn't get their immunization. And it's true that immunization services are not reliably available. Sometimes you walk for a long time to go to a public health place, and then you arrive there, and it's shut, and you come back. You've lost a day, no immunization. That's kind of frustrating, and then people don't do it again. But because we spent a lot of time in this place and we interviewed people, we realized that another issue is that people are always busy with other things. And with immunization, if you don't do it this month, you can always do it next month. It's really not ever an emergency. So it's never really on top of the list for people to do it. And the small cost that it means to go there and get it done might be too high, even if it's a very small cost. So we thought, okay, let's try and test these two ideas. So we worked with a wonderful NGO called Seva Mandir, and they, in turn, teamed up with the government and told the government, we are going to replace you for an area, and we are going to provide golden plate immunization services, very reliable services every month, available at people's doorstep in villages. And then on top of that, so what they did is that they picked 120 villages randomly, that is literally with a random number generator, the modern equivalent of a dice, picked half of them and put in place those services in half of those. And then out of those 60, again randomly picked 30, where they provided people with this very small incentive to show up to the immunization camp. It was a kilo of lentils per shot and a set of plates when you finish. So they did that. They did that for a year. And what we did is that we collected data on immunization status before and after. And because the places were randomly selected, there is nothing different about them except the intervention. Any difference that we find can be confidently attributed to the program. So what we found is that in the status quo villages where nothing particular was done, immunization rates by the end of the experiment were 5%. In the places where they had done the camps, but not the small incentive, immunization rates has climbed to 12%, which is good. It's more than doubling. But in places where they had indeed put, on top of that, put the small incentive, immunization rates were 37%. So that gave us the kind of indication that this was important. And from there, we go in two directions. In the policy direction, we pointed out that it's actually cheaper to give incentive than not to give incentive, because the nurse has to be in the village anyways, and if she immunizes more kids, it's cheaper per shot. So it's a good policy to pursue. On the sort of intellectual side, it sort of got us to think about why is it that a small incentive can persuade people when you would think that it shouldn't really be pertinent, and got us to think more about how people make decisions. Is it that what are their understanding of the healthcare system? What are their understanding of the future and the present, and things like that, which has kind of spanned the whole agenda on understanding this type of behavior. So that's an example that should clarify. Now multiply that by 1,000, and you have the JPAL type of work.
Any in the room? Oh, you again. It's Tom again, yeah.
Where do you want to take your work now?
I think, to be honest, I think we hope that we'll get to do more of the same. I think we are actually quite excited about what we are doing. This was not work that we did a long time ago. We're excited about what we're doing now, and it's fun. We are learning new things. I'm really excited to look at the results from our latest intervention. It's so I think what I hope this will do is just open more opportunities to do more inventive things, but I don't expect to do something entirely different. I think I'm content with what I'm doing, enjoying it very much.
I think maybe one thing that we have started to do, not just us, but Ben over here and various people in the network as well, is working with governments and working at scale with governments to help them evaluate both new approaches but also better ways to do things that they want to do anyways. So this is a larger project. For example, I gave you the example of the immunization project, which was in 120 villages. We are currently analyzing an immunization project in the state of Haryana that has 2,000 villages, and where the results that we are finding will lead to statewide scale-up of whatever works the best. So that's kind of one place in which we are taking it, which is working directly with government on large scales. And the other place, and I think that's really, again, not just us, but the entire network, is we are constantly blown away, literally, by how imaginative people have become in terms of how they can design projects which not only help us see what works and what doesn't work, but help us understand much better how people behave, or how government behave, or how politicians behave, with wonderful imaginative designs. And we want to do, our best to be part of that to the extent we can, or support it to the extent we can.
So this question comes from Julia Hood of Business Insider for you, Professor Duflo. She asks, you are the second woman to receive the Nobel Prize in Economics. What is your hope for the profession in terms of inclusion?
So there are not enough women in the economic profession at all levels. There are not enough undergraduates who choose to take economics. There are not enough graduate students who continue. There are not enough assistant professors. There are not enough tenured faculty. So the reasons why there are so few women who get the Nobel Prize or other prizes is not because the people who give prizes are discriminated against women. It's because the entire funnel is just not big enough. And that's not true just for women, I should say. It's true also for minorities. There are not enough African American in the economic profession by any stretch of imagination. In fact, it makes women look positively numerous. And that has to change. But I think the reason it's the case is because it's two. Maybe I'm wrong but that's my understanding of the reasons. One is the climate is a little bit tough and aggressive, and it doesn't work for everybody. And in particular, it's less likely to work for women than for others. This is something that the profession is starting to reckon with, and that's wonderful. And I think we'll get to the bottom of that. It will take some time, but I think people are much more aware of that it is an issue. I was not aware it was an issue myself because I don't mind aggressive, it doesn't trouble me. But it troubles a lot of other people, and that's unfortunate, and it should not be. There's no reason to be aggressive anyways. The second reason, I think, is because I think many women do not think that economics is all that interesting. Because the vision that economics is it's something, maybe having to do with finance or big macro policy or whatnot. And it has very little to do with the problem that I care about, many women care about. And the truth is that's not true. That in fact, a lot of economics is about the type of work we do, obviously, but the similar work in public finance, in labor economics, etc., on the US, on issues that are important, education, health. But people don't know that. It doesn't really percolate. And we should also remember that there are not very Nobel Prizes that has gone to people who mainly work on social problems. And so being a woman working on social issues, I hope that it can also be kind of a role model for others to think, look, actually, it's pretty interesting, this field, and it's much more varied than you think.
I just want to add, I wonder, one piece of, just take pride in one thing, which is that in our specific little corner of economics, the field of development economics, has many more women than almost any other part of economics. And for example, we have a seminar series that Harvard and MIT jointly run. This semester, it turns out that I rashly said that all those speakers are women. And this was not because of any design. It was simply because these were the best people, and they were invited to come give talks. Turned out I was slightly wrong. There were actually 2 men. But so I think organically it is a field where I'm consistent with maybe what Esther said, which is that maybe some parts of economics are not so interesting to women. We don't have anything like a comparable deficit, which I really do want to take some pride in.
Any more questions in the room? All right, we have just a lot of cards from the internet. Leticia Hernandez with El Financiero in Mexico, she asks, the United Nations warns that the pace of the fight against poverty has fallen, especially in Latin America. What policies should governments prioritize to have effective results in reducing poverty? Health, food, education?
In some ways, I think one of the ways in which we distinguish ourselves is by not answering those questions. I think we'd like to answer these questions after we do the homework. Having one answer for all of Latin America based on never having really studied Latin America, that would be irresponsible. I don't think, I think that would be bad advertisement for our particular style of work. So that's to say, I won't answer it.
Okay, so we have another one, which maybe will be a will not answer, but we'll ask. So NW18 Bengali News asks, what is your opinion on the state of the economy in India? What's in store for the future? And they ask if you could answer in Bengali.
He has an opinion about it.
Yeah. That's a statement not about what will work in the future, but about what's going on now. That I'm entitled to have an opinion about, I feel. The economy is doing very badly, in my view. One of the numbers that just came out is the National Sample Survey, which comes out every 1.5 years or so, and it gives you the average consumption in urban and rural areas in India. And the fact that we see in that is that between 2014-15 and 2017-18, that number has slightly gone down. And that's the first time such a thing has happened in many, 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 many years. So that's a very glaring warning sign. There's enormous fight going on in India about which data is right, and the government has a particular view of all data that's inconvenient to it is wrong. But nonetheless, I think that this is something that I think even the government is increasingly recognizing that there is a problem. So the economy is slowing very, very fast. How fast, we don't know, because there's dispute about data, but I think fast.
He did ask if you could do some of it in Bengali. No?
Sure.
Okay.
এখন এর ব্যাপারে কি করা যাবে? What can we do about this? Okay, let me do. I'll say the whole thing in Bengali and then translate. এ ব্যাপারে কি করা যাবে? সত্যি কথা বলতে আমি জানি না, তবে যতটুকু বলতে পারি এখনকার মতো এই যে আমাদের মনিটারি পলিসি রেজিম যেটা আছে, যেখানে 4%-এর বেশি 3.5%-এর বেশি ডেফিসিট হবে না, এইসব নিয়ে মাথা ঘামিয়ে লাভ নেই। এক্ষুনি ইকোনমিতে খানিকটা আরও পয়সা আনতে হবে এবং গরিবের হাতে পয়সা দিতে হবে, বড় লোকের হাতে পয়সা দেওয়া নয়, গরিবের হাতে আরও বেশি টাকা আনতে হবে। সো I don't know exactly what to do. The government has a large deficit, but right now it's sort of at least aiming to please everybody by pretending to hold to some budgetary targets and monetary targets. And my view is that this is the economy going into a tailspin is the time when you don't worry so much about monetary stability and you worry a little bit more about demand. I think demand is a huge problem right now in the economy.
Thank you. Julia Hood with Business Insider has a follow-up. How does political upheaval domestically and globally impact your work, either at the research level or in its practical applications? Does the private sector step in? There are a few questions in that.
She's referring to the US?
Political upheaval, domestic or global?
I don't think there is any direct impact on our work in the sense that we can mostly continue doing what we are doing. But there is certainly an impact in terms of what we think is important and where we should direct our energies, where we should try and understand a bit better. When you see the upheaval that take place, for example, here or in France or in the rest of Europe, then we feel, we should also start thinking about, is there anything we can bring to understand these issues? And even if it takes us slightly outside of the comfort zone of our work till date, maybe relying on all of the expertise that our colleagues have. So I think it's more a matter of reorienting our brains, both in terms of specific kind of issues and even on the geography of where those issues are concerned. In a sense, it's kind of brought home for me, the current problems that the developed country faces. Brought home for me that even when people's basic material comfort is more or less sustained by the fact that they live in an environment with reasonable safety net, their full life might have the same level of misery and happiness that some of the extremely poor people we study. And therefore, that is also something that is worth thinking about very hard. I used to think, and to a large extent I still think, I should direct my energy in thinking about the poorest person in the world, and then the second poorest person in the world, and then the third poorest person in the world. And now I realize that although that's, of course, different to live in the middle of nowhere and trying to deliver a child and it's not going well and there is no hospital, that from feeling miserable, having lost your job in a mining town in the US, one also has to understand those issues.
So building on that question, Swati Save of Mosike magazine asks about the trend in deglobalization and asks specifically, are Brexit, America First, and several other protectionist campaigns an outcome of capitalism gone wrong, in your view? Is this a will not answer?
Just a small question. So I think they are a consequence of us not taking the consequences of globalization seriously. I think globalization was hurting. As economists, our presumption is that that hurt is temporary and it goes away quickly because people react to that by moving and changing jobs and retraining. We know now that those processes are slow, and as a result, people actually get quite badly hurt. So I think it is a sense in which I would say it's not so much that, I don't know whether this means capitalism went right or wrong. It does mean that I think the way the policy response to the pain caused by globalization was inadequate, often even in the wrong direction. So I do think that that's what it's partly telling us.
And a student from the internet asks, for you, Professor Banerjee, what is your feeling about being the 6th Nobel Laureate from Kolkata?
Young student.
I mean, I assume they're all much more distinguished than me.